Welcome to the next installment of the series. We're back on the trail, following the paths that define this part of the world and uncovering the stories written in the stone and the water. Here is the next chapter. At the edge of the Great Lake lies Lucerne, a city where the calm of the water meets a history that stretches back hundreds of years. Rising above the thick green forest, the great stone ridges watch over the water, marking the gateway to the heart of the country. In the old town, the river flows past rows of historic buildings and red-tilted roofs, leading the way to the famous wooden bridge that defines the city skyline. The Chapel Bridge is the heart of Lucerne, a wooden path that has crossed this river for hundreds of years, connecting the two sides of the historic town. When the sun goes down, the lights of the old tower begin to glow, casting a warm reflection over the calm surface of the Rios. Decorated with vibrant flowers, the bridge is more than just a way across the water. It is a living symbol of the city's long and colourful history. As the journey comes to a close, the memory of these paths remain, a quiet reminder of the power of nature and the endurance of time. This is more than just a destination. It is the heart of a story that never truly ends. At the heart of the valley lies Interlaken, a town built along the bright green waters of the river that links two massive lakes. The town is famous for its old wooden bridges and grand hotels, reflecting a long history of welcoming travelers to the high peaks. Surrounded by steep mountains and wide open fields, it serves as the perfect gateway to the most famous summits in the Alps. In the center of town, wide green fields offer a perfect view of the high peaks that tower over the valley floor. Acting as the gateway to the Bernese Oberland, Interlaken sits perfectly nestled between the emerald waters of Lake Brienz and Lake Thann, offering a breathtaking perspective of the towering peaks that surround this alpine hub. As the train glides through the center of town, the bright green water of the river follows the path of the tracks toward the open lakes. Above the streets, the green forests lead to high ridges that have watched over these crossroads for thousands of years. It is a landscape of scale and light, a final look at the heart of the Alps, sitting perfectly between the lakes. High above the valley, the journey continues on the Gornergrat Railway, a legendary train that has climbed these steep slopes for over a century. As the tracks curve over ancient stone bridges, the train rises above the tree line, moving deeper into the frozen world of the High Alps. The rails lead the way toward the most famous peaks in Europe, creating a path through the snow where the air thins and the view never ends. This historic rank railway climbed over 3,000 meters, carving a path through the permafrost to reveal the most iconic silhouettes in the Alps. At the end of the line, the station stands as one of the highest points in Europe, overlooking a massive sea of ancient ice. From the summit, the full scale of the Alps is revealed, a landscape of jagged peaks that stretch as far as the eye can see. As the climb nears its end, the track follows the edge of the high ridge, where the summer meadows fade into the massive scale of the High Alps. The train moves steady towards the summit, a machine built for the heights, pushing through the thin air toward the roof of the world. As the rails reach the highest point, the journey reveals a final, breathtaking view, a world of ancient stone and ice that stretches to the horizon. On the shores of Lake Brienz sits Iseltwald, a quiet fishing village famous for its wooden pier and crystal clear water. The village sits on a small point of land, surrounded by a deep green lake that gets its colour from the glacial silt of the high mountains. At the edge of the water, an old castle tower stands as a landmark, looking out over a shoreline that has remained peaceful for years. Once a 13th century medieval stronghold, this landmark was rebuilt in the late 1800s, trading its fortress walls for the grand romantic towers seen today. It stands as a silent witness to the lake's history, dark stone contrasting against the deep emerald glow of the Brienz water. Today, that same historical charm carries through to the village streets, where traditional chalets line the shore, preserving the quiet, timeless atmosphere that defines life on Lake Brienz. High above the roofs, the steep slopes of the Alps rise straight out of the lake, covered in deep forests that stay green all year round. From the small church on the hill, you can see across the entire valley, a peaceful corner of the country where time seems to stand still. From the sky, the village of Iseltwald looks like a small island of peace, sitting perfectly between the green forest and the bright blue lake. It is a place of quiet beauty, where the emerald water of Brienz tells the story of the High Alps. In the northeast, the landscape begins in the rolling green hills of Appenzell, a place where traditional life remains tucked away in the quiet valleys. As the ground falls away, the hills turn into sheer vertical walls, where historic structures cling to the side of the mountain high above the clouds. Higher still, the Alpstein Range reveals its sharp and jagged profile, a massive wall of stone that marks the edge of the high mountains and the start of the wild peaks. Along the vertical stone walls, historic shelters are built directly into the mountain, where the solid rock forms the walls of a home high above the clouds. Down in the stillness of the valley, the high peaks reflect in the calm waters of the lake, a quiet world hidden away by the surrounding stone. In the high Meerdals, life follows a slower rhythm, where the green grass and the gentle presence of the herds mark the true heart of the Appenzell Hills. Deep in the east lies Graubünden, a land of high peaks and wild rock, where the mountains are among the tallest in the Alps. The journey down from the summits follows winding roads that carve through the stone, connecting remote villages to the wild valleys below. High in the mountains, the landscape is defined by hidden lakes that stay cold and clear throughout the year. To cross these deep gaps, massive bridges soar high above the valley floor, connecting the rocky peaks with modern engineering. Down below, the small town provides a warm shelter from the thin air and the jagged stone walls that surround them. From above, the scale of the region is clear, a massive network of stone and forest that marks the wild edge of the east. Across these high passes, the winter snow buries the valley floor, turning the jagged limestone ridges into a silent, frozen wilderness that stretches toward the eastern border. This is a world of constant change, where the high summer sun quickly meets the deep, eternal snow of the highest summits. It is a final look in the wild beauty of the east, where the land meets the sky in the grand silence of the Alps. Our journey moves west to Geneva, a global city built at the point where the lake flows back into the river. This is the heart of French-speaking Switzerland, where the clear blue water of the lake meets the rapid current of the Rhone. The skyline is a mix of old stone and modern glass, marking a place that has been a center for peace and trade for hundreds of years. As the city opens up into the harbour, the massive scale of Lake Geneva comes into view, the largest body of water in the country. Geneva is a city of layers, where the busy streets of a world centre meet the calm edge of the open water. At the heart of the bay, a giant plum of water rises 140 meters high, a symbol of the city's energy and spirit. As the sun begins to set, the harbour fills with a warm glow, turning the lake into a mirror for the surrounding hills. Looking out from the shore, the true scale of the lake is clear, a wide, peaceful sea that stretches far into the distance. Further up the coast lies Lausanne, a city built on 3 hills that slope steeply towards the northern edge of the water. This part of the shore is a gateway to the High Alps, where the urban pulse of the city meets the calm of the shoreline. From above, the shape of the lake reveals itself, a giant crescent of blue that has served as a crossroads for Europe for centuries. As the ferries move across the deep water, the journey through the west comes to a close, leaving behind a landscape of light and glass. In the heart of the Grisons, the terrain is so vertical that the only way forward is through the rock. Emerging from the forest is the Landwasser Viaduct, 65 meters of curved masonry that has stood as a masterpiece of mountain rail since 1901. Built without scaffolding, these limestone pillars carry the world's most famous trains directly into the mouth of a sheer cliff wall. It is a seamless transition between human engineering and the raw earth, a journey where the tracks lead directly into the heart of the mountain. Suspended high above the valley floor, the train moves across a masterpiece of stone, entering the most famous railway curve in the Alps. These 6 massive arcs were built to withstand the extreme force of alpine winters, anchored by limestone pillars that go 5 meters deep into the riverbed. On this UNESCO route, the train suddenly leaves the light behind, plunging into the dark of the mountain through a portal carved directly into the cliff. As the forest turns white, the structure fades back into the landscape of brutalist spine of rock, an iron that continues to defy the gravity of the high peaks. Crossing the southern ridges, the landscape undergoes a radical transformation as the sharp alpine peaks give way to the Mediterranean warmth of Lugano. This is the Ticino, a region where Swiss precision meets the relaxed pace of the south, centered around the glacial lake that reaches depths of nearly 300 meters. Along the shoreline, neoclassical palazzos and subtropical gardens line the promenade, creating a cityscape that feels more like the Italian Riviera than the High Alps. It is a place of vivid contrasts, where snow-capped horizons frame a world of olive trees and sun-drenched piazzas, marking the warmest corner of the country. Nestled against the steep slopes of Monte is the village of Grandeur, a vertical maze of stone and colour that remains inaccessible to cars. It's a place where the pace of life slows down, dominated by the beauty of the lake and the lush, green slopes that protect these ancient fishing towns. As we rise above the red tilted roofs, the campanile of San Vigiligo stands as a landmark for sailors, marking a shoreline that has changed little since the Middle Ages. From the open water, the village dissolves back into the mountain, a final pocket of stillness in a region where the spirit of Italy and the heart of Switzerland are one. From these heights, the true scale of the lake is revealed, a deep blue waterway that carves its way through the border of two nations. Descending into the villages, the narrow alleys offer a sun-looked at local life, where the scent of flowers and the warmth of the sun-baked stone define the afternoon. This is the famous Olive Path, a historic trail connecting the fishing towns where the weather is so mild that ancient trees still grow beneath the mountain peaks. Here, the mountain air meets the warmth of the south, creating a landscape that feels like a world away from the high Alps. It is a final look at the quiet beauty of the south, where Switzerland finds its Mediterranean soul. Deep in the Bernese Oberland lies a vertical world carved by ancient ice, a U-shaped cleft where human life is bracketed by 1,000-meter limestone walls. This is the Valley of 72 Springs. Its most famous icon, the Stachbach Falls, dissolves into a fine mist before it ever hits the ground. A site that once inspired a young J.R.R. Tolkien to create the elven refuge of Rivendell. Geologically, this is one of the deepest throws in the Alps. The sheer verticality of the cliffs forces every stream to become a sky-high cascade, fueling a constant roar that echoes through the valley. At the heart of the valley floor, the village sits beneath massive limestone walls, where giant waterfalls drop hundreds of meters into the green Meerdals below. From the deep shadows of the valley floor, the sheer scale of the Oberland is a constant presence, where the sun only reaches the lower Meerdals for a few hours each day. As we climb, the limestone walls fall away to reveal a hidden high-altitude world, a plateau of ancient ice and alpine tundra that has remained untouched for millennia. It is the ultimate mountain landscape, a collision of vertical rock and glacial water that marks the end of our journey through the heart of the heights. The landscape here is governed by the historical pulse of Schaffhausen and its circular stone fortress. On the limestone shelf above the drop, Laufen Castle stands as a witness to the sheer kinetic force of Europe's largest waterfall. At the base, the river is a chaotic engine of white water where yellow vessels navigate a surge of 600,000 litres per second. It is a frontier of gravity and power, a relentless current that has carved its way through the bedrock of the north. This settlement was born from the river's necessity, a trading post established where the Rhine's shallow waters forced every merchant to unload and bypass the falls. For 500 years, the city's defense was anchored by the Munot, a circular stone fortress designed as a permanent statement of northern independence. Behind these walls, 1,000 years of history are written in the stone gates and Renaissance facades that grew from the wealth of a bottlenecked river. It is a city defined by its medieval past, standing guard over the most powerful stretch of water in the north. Here, the engineering of the past meets the momentum of the present, bridging the gap between a medieval core and the raw energy of the water. It is a landscape where history and kinetic power are inseparable, a chapter written in stone and defined by the relentless current. The journey moves to the shores of Lake Geneva, where the village of Saint Saffron anchors a landscape carved by monks nearly 1,000 years ago. Here, the architecture is inseparable from the land. These stone villages were built specifically to serve the 10,000 terraces that stack up the hillsides. This region thrives on the legend of the three suns, the direct warmth from the sky, the reflection of the lake, and the heat stored in the ancient stone walls that warm the grapes through the night. Life along the lake follows a steady aquatic cadence, as historic ferries connect these steep slopes to the heart of the Swiss shoreline. These hamlets are a complex network of stone and timber, anchored by the same limestone that supports 400 kilometers of hand-built retaining walls. From the upper elevations, the sheer scale of the landscape is undeniable. 40 levels of cultivation that have been meticulously managed for nearly a millennium. It is a living monument to human persistence, where the geometry of the vines serves as a permanent record of the generations who tend this soil. It is a final look at the heart of Swiss viticulture, a landscape of three suns, stone walls, and a millennium of tradition carved into the shore. In the heart of the Bernese Oberland, Oeschinen Lake sits as a UNESCO World Heritage jewel, a glacial basin fed by the surrounding 4,000-meter peaks. This alpine sanctuary remains frozen for 5 months of the year, preserving the startling turquoise clarity of the water below the ancient pine forests. Above the tree line, the earth rises in vertical sheets of limestone, colossal walls that trap the silence of the high mountains. It is a landscape shaped by the slow movement of ice and time, where the clouds drift through the jagged teeth of the Oberland. The descent begins with the Uschibach, a relentless surge of glacial runoff that carves through prehistoric rock to reach the valley floor. High above the waterline, the sheer verticality of the Bernese Alps becomes clear, a landscape where human scale is entirely swallowed by the limestone massif. This basin is an enclosed ecosystem, where the water's vivid blue is intensified by the high mineral content of the melting blue Alp ice. From the high ridges, the lake sits as a static anchor in a moving world of shifting clouds and eternal glacial flow. Deep in the Valais Alps, Zermatt remains a sanctuary of silence. To protect the air and the view, this village has banned combustion engines for over half a century. As the valley floor drops away, the village's namesake, the Matte, or Meerdau, gives way to the vertical world of the Horn. Geologically, the Matterhorn is a traveller. Its summit is composed of rock from the African plate, thrust over Europe by the slow collision of continents millions of years ago. It stands as the most recognizable silhouette on Earth, a four-sided pyramid of African gneiss and Swiss history that continues to define the spirit of alpinism. In the winter, the village transforms into a high-altitude sanctuary, where the architecture is designed to withstand the crushing weight of alpine snow. At street level, the pace of life follows the seasons, centered around the community that has lived in the shadow of the peaks for centuries. But the true scale of the Valais is only revealed above the mist, where the air thins and the geological giants of Europe finally break through. In its reflection, we see the enduring beauty of Switzerland, clear, constant, and timeless, a symbol of the wild, and a reminder of the wonders that wait for those who look upward. On the linguistic border of Switzerland lies Murten, a town defined by the calm waters of its namesake lake and 8 centuries of preservation. This medieval core was built as a strategic stronghold, where the architecture remains almost entirely unchanged since the 15th century. Along the shores of the lake, a peaceful path leads towards the stone walls of one of the country's best preserved medieval towns. This historic fortress has stood for centuries, where traditional red roofs and quiet harbours reflect a long history of life on the water. The town's preservation is its greatest asset, a medieval silhouette where the lakefront path meets the unchanged architecture of the Zalringer dynasty. As the sun sets over the water, the linguistic border between French and German-speaking Switzerland is bridged by the silence of the old town walls. From above, the city's strategic geometry becomes clear. A cluster of stone and timber that has stood as a bastion of the north for 8 centuries. It is a final look at a fortress defined by the lake, a chapter of Swiss history preserved in every roof tile and rampart. High above the valley, life clings to the crest of the Vine-terraced. Here, a narrow thread of dirt is the only path forward, winding through the alpine meadows where the earth simply ends. For some, the path isn't enough. They take to the air, drifting on the thermals that rise from the lakes far below. It is a perspective earned through height, where the jagged teeth of the Alps finally give way to the open sky. At the summit of the Vine-terraced, the scale of the Central Alps comes into sharp, panoramic focus. A narrow dirt thread follows the curve of the ridge, where every step is balanced between the high meadow and the vertical mile of empty space. As the clouds break, the last of the winter snow clings to the high rock, a reminder of the raw, unyielding power of the high country. We begin where the water meets the hem of the hills, at the geometric docks of the Swiss East. Against the deep teal of Walensee, a single white plume marks the pace of a slower lakeside life. From above, the map reveals a fragile grip on the land. Houses huddled between the rising forest and the lake that holds no bottom. A world defined by the vertical and the blue. But as the eye climbs, the gentleness of the shore evaporates into grey stone. This is the Linth Plain, where the engineering of the 19th century tamed the mountain floods to make this valley habitable. Above us, the Terraces stand like jagged sentinels, walls of limestone that have frozen the sun for eons. On these vertical banks, the soil is held in place by stone and sweat terraced vineyards that have produced wine since the Romans first charted these waters, a landscape shaped by the hands of those who refused to move. Today, the silence of the cliffs is shared with the hum of the modern world. This is Kettensenberg, a feat of engineering that finally threaded a needle through the rock, connecting the heart of Europe to the plains of the north. But even as the road reaches higher, the scale remains humbling. At this altitude, the geography still dictates the terms of life. A frontier of stone where Switzerland's history is written in the shadow of the peaks.